abbot, a man who is head of a monastery. Abdicate, to resign as a ruler. Absolute, not limited by constitutional restraints. Absolute monarchy, a system of government in which the ruling monarch has unlimited power. Absolutism, a government in which the ruler's power is unlimited. Acid rain, rainwater that is polluted with chemicals. Acropolis, a fortified hilltop in an ancient Greek city. Aggressor, a person or nation that initiates an unprovoked attack. Agora, in ancient Greece, the marketplace where people gathered. Anarchist, a person who believes that all governments are evil and therefore should be overthrown. Anthropologist, a person who studies early human beings and the way societies and cultures originate and are organized. Antibiotic, a chemical used to destroy or slow the growth of harmful bacteria. Anti-Semitism, hostility or discrimination against the Jews. Apartheid, South Africa's legal system of complete, rigid separation between blacks and whites. Apostle, one of Jesus' followers who preached and spread the teachings of Jesus. Appeasement, a policy of making concessions to an aggressor in hopes of avoiding war. Apprentice, a person who is learning a trade or craft from a master and who works without pay except for room and board. Aqueduct, a long bridge-like structure that carries water to populated areas. Archaeologist, a person who studies the remains of ancient societies to learn about past ways of life. Arete, the ideal of striving for excellence, showing courage and winning fame and honor. Aristocracy, in ancient Greece, a government dominated by a small group of noble families, today a small privileged group. Armed aggression, military invasion, a war of conquest. Armistice, an agreement to stop fighting. Artifact, a human-made object like a tool or weapon or ornament that represents a stage of human development. Artisan, a skilled worker who makes goods by hand. Assembly line, a line of factory workers and machinery along which a product passes, with each worker doing a specialized task until the product is complete. Astrolabe, an instrument that is used to observe and calculate latitude by charting the position of the stars. Authoritarian, requiring absolute loyalty and obedience to the state. Autocracy, a government in which the ruler has unlimited power and uses it in an arbitrary manner. Gladiator, In ancient Rome, a person who fought an opponent to the death in a public arena. Glasnost, a Russian term for the policy of openness in the Soviet Union. Global economy, all the financial institutions among people, businesses, and governments that cross international borders. Gravitas, the Roman virtue of weightiness or seriousness, which is related to the qualities of discipline, strength, and loyalty. Page 904. Greenhouse effect. A worldwide warming trend caused by increased amounts of carbon dioxide trapped in the Earth's atmosphere. Grid, a set of lines that cross one another to form squares used to identify the location of places. Griot, a person in West Africa society who is trained as a record keeper. Gross national product, GNP, the total value of goods and services produced by a country in a year. Guerrilla, a band of fighters not part of a formal army who attack suddenly and withdraw swiftly. Guild, an association of people who work at the same occupation. Habeas corpus, the right of a prisoner to obtain a writ or document ordering that the prisoner be brought before a court or judge. Hegira, Muhammad's flight from Mecca to Medina in AD 622. Heliocentric theory, a theory that the sun is the center of the universe. Hellenism, a blend of Greek and Eastern cultures, Hellenistic culture. Helot, in ancient Sparta, a peasant forced to work the land. Hemisphere, one half of a sphere or globe. It can be the hemisphere north or south of the equator, or the east or west of the prime meridian. Heresy, religious belief or opinions that differ from the dogma of the Church. Heretic, a person whose ideas are incorrect in the opinion of the Church. Hieroglyphics, a form of Egyptian writing based on pictorial characters for words and sounds. History, a systematic record of past events that includes the development of peoples, cultures, and countries. Holocaust, the systematic murder of the European Jews by the Nazis. Home rule, self-government given to a country, territory, or political unit by a higher governing body. Hominid, a creature that walks upright rather than on all fours. Hoplite, a foot soldier of ancient Greece who fought with a shield and a spear. Huguenot, in the 1500s and 1600s, a French Protestant who was a follower of Calvinism. Human-environment interaction, the effect of the environment on people's way of living and the ways people modify their environment. Humanist, one who studies classical texts. Human rights, the protection of individuals against oppression, the preservation of basic rights and freedoms for individuals. Icon, a small piece of art that depicts a religious image. Iconoclast, a person who opposes the use or belief in icons. Ideology, a set of beliefs that influences political, social, and economic actions. Immigration, entering and settling in a country other than one's native country. Imperialism, the policy of extending one country's rule over many lands. Import, to bring goods into the country for sale. Import substitution, the policy of replacing foreign goods with locally manufactured products. Impressionism, a style of painting that captures the light effects and the impression of scenes from everyday life. Indulgence, a pardon given by the Roman Catholic Church in return for repentance for sins. Industrialization, the process of developing machine-made goods. Industrialized nation, a nation that has developed industry. Industrial Revolution, the period 1800s and 1900s of greatly increased output of machine-made goods. Inflation, an overall rise in the price of goods and services. Institution, a long-lasting pattern of organization in a society. Governments, families, education systems, and organized religions are examples of institutions. Interchangeable parts, machine parts that are identically made so that they can replace each other. Interdict, an order from the Pope prohibiting church ceremonies in the lands of a ruler who is disobedient to the Pope. Page 905. Internment camp, a prison-like camp for political prisoners, aliens, or prisoners of war. Intervention, the act of interfering in another country's domestic or foreign affairs. Intifada, the campaign of civil disobedience by the Palestinians to gain an independent Palestinian state. Investiture, a feudal ceremony in which a vassal receives land or a bishop takes office, an act that symbolically confirms an agreement through the exchange of objects. Iron Curtain, the division of Europe into two political regions, communist and non-communist. Irrigation, the process of bringing water to crop fields by means of canals and ditches. Isolationism, the idea that a country should avoid political or military alliances with other countries. Jihad, in Islam, a holy war. Joint stock company, a business arrangement in which many investors together raise money for a venture too large for any of them to undertake alone. They share the profits in proportion to amount they invest. Journeyman, a person who after completing an apprenticeship works at a craft for wages under the supervision of a master. Judicial, having to do with the branch of government that interprets the law. Junker, a member of Prussia's landowning nobility. Jury, a group of people sworn to give a verdict based on evidence in a court of law. In medieval England, usually 12 neighbors who answered questions about the facts of a case for a royal judge. Kaiser, the German emperor. Karma, in Hinduism and Buddhism, the ethical laws of cause and effect, determining a person's destiny. Under karma, a person's behavior in this life will determine the person's fate in the next life. Khan, the leader of a group of Mongols. Kibbutz, in Israel, a communal farm or settlement where people live, work, and share profits in common. Knight, an armored warrior who fought on horseback. Laissez-faire, a belief in the absence of government regulations or of business. Laser, a device that produces a beam of light, often used in extremely fine operations, such as surgery, communications, and printing. Latitude, a set of imaginary grid lines, always the same distance apart, that encircle the globe from east to west. They measure distance north and south. Lay investiture, the feudal ceremony of investiture performed by a person who is not a member of the clergy. See also investiture. Legion, the massive military unit of the Roman army. It was made up of 4,000 to 6,000 infantrymen and a group of cavalrymen. Legislative, having to do with the branch of government that makes the laws. Legitimacy, the principle that rulers who have been driven from their thrones should be restored to power. Less developed country, a nation that has limited resources and few opportunities for economic growth. Liberalism, a political philosophy of limited government and protection of individual rights and freedoms. Liberation theology, the doctrine that the Church has a moral obligation to use political actions to improve the plight of the poor. Limited monarchy, a government headed by a king or queen whose powers are limited by laws. Limited war, a war in which one or both sides aim at less than an all-out victory by agreeing to limit the kinds of weapons used. Lineage, a group of families including past generations and living members, descended from a common ancestor. Literacy, the ability to read and write. Page 906. Loess, a dusty yellow-brown, rich soil deposited by wind and floodwaters. Longitude, a set of imaginary grid lines that run from the North Pole to the South Pole. The lines measure distances east and west. Lord, in the feudal system, the person, a vassal, who makes a grant of land to another person. Mat, in ancient Egypt, the idea of goodness that includes justice, right, truth, and order. Mandate, a territory that was administered on behalf of the League of Nations, or currently on behalf of the United Nations, until it was judged ready for independence. Mandate of heaven, in ancient China, the belief that the royal authority to rule comes through divine approval. This authority is communicated by the gods to the ruler. Manor, a small estate from which a lord's family gained its livelihood. Market economy, an economy characterized by competition, supply and demand, and the absence of regulation. Martial law, law that is enforced by military authorities over the civilian population of a country, as if the country were in a state of war. Martyr, one who chooses to die rather than give up a principle or cause. Mass culture, the appeal of artists, writers, and musicians to an audience of all classes, not just the upper class. Mass production, large quantities of goods made by machines. Materialism, the focus on possessions, comforts, and material things rather than on intellectual or spiritual matters. Matrilineal, a system in which a young man inherits land or wealth from his mother's brother rather than from his father. Medieval, relating to the Middle Ages or the period in Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire. Mercantilism, an economic theory under which a country increases its wealth by exporting more goods than it imports. Mercenary, a soldier who is paid to fight in another country's army. Mesoamerica, the lands, Mexico and Central America, between the United States and South America. Messiah, a savior chosen by God. Mestizo, a person in Latin America who is of mixed European and Indian ancestry. Microtechnology, the technology producing complex systems in miniature form to reduce their weight. Middle class, in the Middle Ages, the class of people positioned between the nobles and the peasant. Today, the social class made up of professionals, skilled workers, business people, and wealthy farmers. Militarism, glorification of armed strength. Minaret, a slender tower on a mosque that is used to call Muslims to prayer. Missi Dominici, royal agents of Charlemagne who checked on the ruling courts. Mobilize, to position an army for war. Moderate socialism, government support for social welfare programs and government ownership of major industries within a democratic society. Moksha, in Hinduism, the state of perfect understanding in which the inner self disappears to merge with the all-powerful spirit. Monarchy, government headed by a king or queen. Monastery, a religious community of men or women who give up all their possessions, live in seclusion, and devote their lives to worship, prayer, and self-denial. Monopoly, complete control over an industry, a product, or a service. Monotheist, a person who believes in one God. Monsoon, a seasonal wind that blows dry air part of the year, then shifts directions, bringing heavy rainfall the other part of the year. Page 907, Mosque, a Muslim temple. Mulatto, a person in Latin America who is of European and African ancestry. Multinational corporation, a company that has branches in many countries. Myth, a story often about gods and heroes used to explain nature and the power of human passions. Nationalism, a feeling of loyalty for one's own land and people, the belief that one's greatest loyalty should be to one's country. Nationalize, to bring an industry under government control. Nation-state, a group of people who occupy a definite territory and are united under one government. Nazism, German fascism, the doctrine of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, based on totalitarianism, racial superiority, and state control of industry. Negotiation, the process of making trade-offs. Neutrality, a policy of refusing to support either side, especially in war. Nihilism, a belief that the existing society and government must be destroyed so that a better society can be created. Nirvana, in Buddhism, the condition of release from pain and selfishness achieved when the soul merges into the Supreme Being and reaches a perfect state of blessedness. Non-aggression pact, an agreement pledging not to attack another nation. Non-alignment, a policy of refusing to take sides in the Cold War. Non-violence, a policy of refusing to resort to violence. Nuclear family, a family group that includes parents or a single parent and children. Nuclear weapon, a weapon that is powered by atomic energy. Oasis, a place in a desert where underground water comes to the surface in a spring or well. Obsidian, a smooth, dark-colored volcanic glass. Occupational zone, an area controlled by Allied military forces. Occupy, to seize or take over an area. Oracle bones, animal bones and tortoise shells, scratched with Chinese characters. They were used by Chinese priests to foretell the future during the Shang dynasty. Ozone layer, the upper level of the Earth's atmosphere, about 8 to 30 miles above the Earth. Papyrus, a reed that grows in a marshy delta, especially in the Nile River region. Parliament, a legislative body consisting of two houses, Lords and Commons, similar to that established in the 11th century in England. Partition, the division of a country into two or more parts. Passive resistance, the use of non-violent moral methods to resist authority, civil disobedience. Patriarch, the bishop of Constantinople, head of the Eastern Orthodox Church. Partition, in ancient Rome a member of the privileged upper class. Peninsular, a person in Latin America who was born in Spain or Portugal. Per capita income, the amount of money that a person would receive if the total income of the workers of a country were divided equally among all the men, women, and children in the country. Perestroika, a Russian term for economic restructuring and relaxing of government control in the Soviet Union. Perspective, a technique of giving objects in a picture the appearance of depth and distance. Phalanx, a Greek army unit made up of soldiers standing side by side, their shields and spears forming a solid wall. Page 908. Pharaoh, a king of Egypt who was considered a god. Philosophe, one of a group of thinkers in the early 1700s, who believed in reason, liberty, natural law, progress, and human happiness. Philosopher, a person who seeks wisdom and truth. Physiocrat, an economic theorist who argued against government regulations and favored freedom of industry and trade. Plebeian, a common farmer, artisan or merchant in ancient Rome. A plebeian was a free citizen with the right to vote. Plebiscite, an election in which all citizens vote yes or no on an issue. Pogrom, an organization, systematic, mass murderer of a minority group, such as the Jews in Nazi Germany. Policy, a plan of action that guides an individual, group, or government. Polis, a Greek city-state. Pollution, air or water contamination by harmful wastes or chemicals. Polytheist, a person who believes in more than one god. Pope, the Bishop of Rome, head of the Roman Catholic Church. Predestination, the doctrine that God has known since the beginning of time who will be saved. Prehistory, the period of time before the beginning of written records. Prime meridian, the imaginary line that runs through Greenwich, England, and is the starting line from which longitude is measured, either east or west. Prime Minister, the leader of the majority party in a country's parliament. The Prime Minister heads the cabinet. Profit, the money gained from the sale of goods after expenses have been paid. Projection, a way of drawing the Earth's curved surface on a map. Proletariat, the poorest class in ancient Rome, according to Marx, the urban working class. Propaganda, one-sided information designed to convince people of a certain point of view. Prophet, a messenger sent to reveal God's will. Protectorate, a country or state that is controlled by an outside government. Protestant, a Christian who is a member of a Protestant church. Pueblo, a village of Native American dwellings in the Southwest. Puppet government, a government controlled by an outside power. Purdah, the Muslim practice of keeping women in seclusion. Pyramid, an immense structure used as a tomb by the pharaohs. Quipu, a series of knotted strings used by the Incas to tally births, crops, herds, deaths, and other facts and events. Radical, a person favoring sweeping economic or social change. Radicalism, a political movement supporting drastic and, if necessary, violent change. Radioactivity, the energy released from an atom in elements such as uranium or radium. Rationing, a system limiting the amount of goods people can buy during a time of shortage. Realism, a philosophy characterized by the precise, accurate observation and report of real life. Realpolitik, the politics of reality, used to describe the tough practical politics in which idealism plays no part. Recession, a temporary economic slowdown involving increased unemployment and decreased production. Reconquista. Over about 5 centuries, the reconquest or recovery of Christian lands from the Muslims. Referendum. A direct popular vote on a legislative act or some public issue. Page 909. Reformation. A religious crisis in the 1500s in the Roman Catholic Church that led to the establishment of Protestant churches. Refugee. A person who flees to a foreign country to escape danger. Reincarnation. The idea that the inner self is reborn in another form. Relativity. The principle of relative motion and the interrelation between time, space, and matter based on Einstein's theory.